Hello, everyone. Welcome back to part two of our conversation about where you can shoot and what your rights are as a photojournalist. So let's pick up where we left off. Let's go over to screen two and let's take a look at our conversation on photographers' rights. Let's move this stuff out of the way. Aha! So we picked up at number 5 after covering the first 4 in our first video. Number 5 of the general 10 commandments of the rights of photojournalists is that people can be photographed if they are in public without their consent, as in you don't need to go and ask them their permission, unless they have secluded themselves and can expect a reasonable degree of privacy. This is probably the number one biggest misconception in photojournalism from people learning this craft and learning the legal side of it for the first time. The idea that you need permission to take someone's picture in public is a complete falsity. You do not need somebody's permission. Now, let's be very clear. That is because the laws in the state of Georgia protect the voice and the video of people. So you can't record people video or audio wise without their consent in the state of Georgia, but you can take still pictures of them. You can use still photography to take pictures of them, and that is not a situation where they need to give you permission. But there are certain circumstances where you should consider asking for that permission anyway, because this also includes children. You don't have to get parental permission to take pictures of a child in public. Legally speaking, you can go to a playground and take pictures of all the kids you want to and publish them on your website or in your newspaper or whatever. But this is where the difference between the law and ethics really split. Ethically, I would say it's a really good idea to ask the parents of kids you take pictures of if you are okay publishing them, because maybe there's a situation where one parent doesn't want the other parent to know where they're at because of a past situation with abuse or something like that. Like, you have to think through these things. I think it is a good idea in general, if you take pictures of people in public, candid, to go up and introduce yourself, let them know what you took the picture for and how you intend on using it. Also, as a photojournalist and not just a photographer, you need to get information for captions anyway, so you need to be going up and talking to people. So they don't need to grant you permission for you to use that photograph, but I still think it's a good idea to talk to them anyway. So what does the idea of a reasonable expectation of privacy mean? It could mean that they are at an ATM. If someone is using an ATM, the basic idea is they have secluded themselves enough or have an expectation of privacy enough that you really shouldn't be taking pictures of them. And this is one that actually has been a big deal lately, is that photojournalists need to be mindful of medical situations, namely in hospitals or clinics. That is a place where someone is said to have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And it's where, if we think back to part 1 of the video, where I was talking about your ability to stand in public, in a public space, and take pictures of a private space, doesn't quite come into play. So you're standing on the sidewalk and you are taking pictures with a very long zoom lens. If you're taking it into pictures into a restaurant or bar, you are totally fine. If you're taking pictures with the zoom lens into a clinic window or in a hospital, that'll get you in trouble. So just be mindful of the idea of expectation of privacy. Is this a place where the subject, an average person, would reasonably expect to have a sense of privacy and not have their picture taken? Oftentimes, you're going to need to go back and consider the ethics of a situation when dealing with these scenarios. This is, like I said, where the law and the ethics split. Legally, your rights are one thing, but you do need to consider the ethics of it. Like, am I causing unneeded stress or harm to somebody by taking pictures of them in what they think is a private setting? Ask yourself these questions to guide you, not just for the legal side, but for the ethical side. So number 6, thou shalt not fall victim to popular myths about where you can shoot and who you can take pictures of. Like I said, one of the biggest myths that exists in photojournalism is that you need permission from someone's parents to take pictures of their children, and that is simply not the case. You are able to take pictures of children out in public and publish them all you want to without permission. Now, should you? Probably not, but legally you can. Also, myths have populated in the last, or in the years after 9/11, that you can't take pictures of bridges. That is not the case. I've already talked about how you can't take pictures, or you can take pictures in airports. That is fine. There's a big myth that you can't take pictures in an airport. That is incorrect. Some of the more confusing stuff comes in when it turns to taking pictures of police. This kind of depends on where you live. Luckily, we live in a state that the Federal Circuit Court has determined or has established that there's constitutional protections for filming or taking pictures of the police. So Georgia is one of the states where the federal government has, or at least the Federal Circuit Court has said that you have the right to film and take pictures of the police. Other states in the United States have put laws in place that limit that, or have even tried to outright ban it. Those have always been tied up in courts, and certain decisions have been made one way, certain decisions have been made the other. The big thing to remember is that you are within your rights in the state of Georgia to photograph the police. Which then leads us to number 7, because if you photograph police, you're probably going to get hassled. So, number 7, if you are challenged, you do not have to explain why you are taking pictures, nor do you have to disclose your identity. And by that, I mean who it is you are working for and taking pictures for. Now, that said, you don't want to go against your journalistic ethics here. You do what you know is right. You don't lie to people. As journalists, we should never lie to people. However, just because you're a student journalist or you're a citizen journalist, you're a freelance journalist, doesn't mean that you have any fewer rights to access, doesn't mean you have any fewer rights as a photographer than a professional does. So if there's a crime scene and police start letting a professional photographer into the scene, you are within your rights to request access to that, and they are supposed to let you in and have the same access that they would to any professional photographer. Now, does it always happen this way? No, but we're talking about what the rights actually are, not really how the police interpret them. Also, this is a tip I've given to my sports class, but I'll give it to you all as well. There's no magic about press credentials. If you're a freelance photographer, I would highly suggest that you use Microsoft, or you use Adobe InDesign and Adobe Photoshop, and you put together your own press pass, print it off on good paper, put it in one of those little clear plastic clippy things, and clip it to yourself. It helps you be upfront about the fact that you're working as a photojournalist, and don't let it be the reason you're treated special, but it certainly helps that you can be clearly identified as press. So yeah, go ahead and do that. I think that's a really good thing. I may actually make that extra credit now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I'm gonna make a note. Number 8, civilians, aka just people in general, have almost no rights to detain you against your will, and they can be subject to legal action if they harass you. So we're not talking about police here. We're talking about business owners or bartenders or club bouncers or store managers. We're talking about the people who might get mad that you're taking pictures and might try to stop you from leaving. So remember, if you can get kicked out of someplace, if a business manager comes over and says you need to leave, absolutely, you have to leave. At that point, if you don't leave, you'll be arrested for trespassing by the police, because they'll probably call the police. But let's say it happens like this. Let's say you are taking pictures in a store. The store owner comes over and says, hey, you can't take pictures here. You need to leave. And you say, okay, and you go to turn towards the door. But then the store manager says, wait, I want to see what pictures you took. You're going to need to delete anything that was pictures from inside of the store. If you start to then continue to leave, but they get in your way, they tell you you can't leave, they tell you you need to wait for police, they try to grab you, they try to get in front of you or block your entrance or your exit from the building, they are the ones now breaking the law. They cannot hold you anywhere. It's the same reason why stores can't physically detain anybody who shoplifts. They don't have the power. They're not police. So if you're in a situation where you are the photographer and somebody is making you feel threatened, they're not letting you leave a place, they're grabbing you, you need to call the police. You need to be the one to initiate the bringing in of the authorities and make it clear to whoever it is that is trying to detain you or is trying to stop you, hey, I'm calling the cops now. If somebody gets in your face, they don't have to touch you. If somebody gets in your face, is yelling at you or screaming at you, they have legally committed assault, and you can press charges against them at least if the police are willing to cooperate with you. If they grab your arm, if they try to grab your camera, if they push you, if they physically touch you in any way, they have committed battery. Both of these, with assault and battery, work together to be felony charges. And most people, if you just tell them, hey, I'm going to tell the cops you shoved me, or I'm going to tell the cops you grabbed me, is usually enough for them to put their hands up and let you go about your business. But just so we're clear what the law is, on this situation, the law is on your side. That leads us to number 9. If somebody tries to confiscate your camera or take your SD card or take anything that has your photos stored on them, stop them. Do not, if they ask for it, don't give it to them. Do not let them have it. Nobody, police or otherwise, again, this includes the police, nobody is allowed to touch your camera equipment. No one is allowed to touch your camera or your SD cards without a warrant. More on that in a second. If they take it by force, if they take your camera or your SD card, if they threaten you, they can be liable for anything that they do. At that point, they're liable for coercion. If they take your equipment, they're liable for theft. Law enforcement officers, so police, they have to have a court order. They have to take a piece of paperwork to a judge and have a judge sign off on it in order to access your SD cards. They cannot legally take your camera from you and start looking through your cameras. And you, under no circumstances, should you let them do that. Police officers have been charged with theft and have gotten kicked off of their respective police departments for taking SD cards from photographers, because oftentimes they will take the SD cards and they will wipe them clean. So that is not only theft, but that is destruction of property, and they can't do that. And that's thanks to a Supreme Court decision from 2014. It was a case called Riley v. the State of California, no relation, back from 2014, and it says police cannot search electronic information off of a cell phone, which the courts have since then determined counts the same as SD cards and DSLR cameras, even if someone has been arrested, unless they have a warrant specifically for the phone or the camera or the device. This was a case that was picked up by the ACLU and has since been supported by the ACLU. And if you ever find yourself running into problems as a photojournalist, SPJ is a good place to turn, as well as the ACLU. They like supporting photojournalists. So again, nobody, including the police, can delete your photographs off of your camera without your permission. If they do, it is theft and destruction of property, and you can press charges against them. And finally, last but not least, number 10, thou shalt understand that even high-ranking, well-known, credentialed photojournalists working for wire services or national newspapers or even global news agencies, even people working for some of the top news companies in the world, have to deal with getting hassled as photographers. It just happens. It's frustrating and it's unfortunate, but it is commonplace being a photojournalist and getting hassled. Photojournalists just get themselves arrested a lot. This is a series of photographs from the protests in Ferguson, Missouri from a few years ago of an AP photographer who is credentialed with the Associated Press getting arrested. Here's another photograph from the same incident. One of the things I've always liked about this photograph is that the fellow on the left is the one getting arrested, and what he's doing is handing all of his cameras and gear off to the person on the right who is not arrested so that he can make sure that his photographs are not deleted mysteriously by the police. If a police officer tries to violate your rights as a photographer, the best course of action is as soon as they start questioning you, you should have one answer back to them, which is, "Can I go now?" If they say no, congratulations, you are now officially detained by the police. Once you have been officially detained by the police, then they have to prove justification to you as to why they are detaining you. They have to either charge you with something or they have to let you go. So if you are confronted by the police and they are aggravated, if you are confronted by the police and they are challenging you as a photojournalist, all you really need to say to them, or all you need to really ask them is, can I go now? They say no, then you deal with the repercussions of that. Oftentimes they will just say yeah and let you go on your way. If they say no and you are in the right because you are in a public space and you are not trespassing, ultimately you are the one who will have the last laugh, thankfully. Make sure you get as much proof as you can about whatever's happening to you, no matter who is hassling you. So try to audio record or video record if you can, if people are hassling you, particularly if it's police. Police do have the right to order people away from a scene in the state of Georgia. So let's say the police are arresting somebody. If you are up in their face with a DSLR, they can tell you to back up. They can tell you you need to go 10, 15, 20 feet away. They can make you walk somewhere else, but they can't tell you you're not allowed to take any pictures. And that is our conversation on the interference that happens a lot with photojournalists, as well as the rights that we have as photojournalists to take pictures in public spaces and to take pictures of people in public spaces. Hopefully you will never really need to know this stuff that we've just talked about. Hopefully you'll never find yourself threatened or harassed, and hopefully you'll never find yourself having your rights as a photographer violated by the police. But if you're going to work in photojournalism for any period of time, it'll probably happen at least once. So please remember the golden rule: stay calm, stay polite, don't yell back if people are yelling at you. And with that, we are done with this presentation for the week. All of this stuff from these lessons are going to go on the final exam, so please make sure you are watching them and paying attention to them. But if you've gotten to the end of this lecture, you probably at least are watching it, so that's pretty cool. So as a reminder, please remember where to point. Please wash your hands and have a good rest of your week.